Good morning. So it is a nice day, which means for me in Iowa, it means it's not windy and it's almost sunny. It goes between partly cloudy and sunny, but that means I'm actually able to work outside. And you can see that spring really is coming finally, because if you look behind me, do you see all that? Yeah, that is green grass, which means the grass is coming out of dormancy. We're getting closer to when the grass will start growing. Maybe in a week or two, I'm thinking I might actually have to start cutting it. Maybe next week. I like to actually let it get a little bit shaggy before I really start that cut. But what I'm doing today is just a few different things around the yard. I want to fertilize the yard, which a lot of you have asked about, and we're going to go over that. And I'm also planting a few trees. So if you follow me, you know I pretty much plant the whole time from early spring, whenever I can get into the ground, until fall. And the thing with planting is, if you can dig a nice hole, if your ground is thawed and has some great action to be able to dig into it with, you are able to plant, especially dormant things like trees. So right now nurseries are getting in trees, and you're gonna see they don't have leaves or anything when they're deciduous. No, they are dormant, which is a great time to transplant and plant them in your yard because they're in that dormant state. So they're gonna have less stress. So I wanna show you kind of what I'm working on, what we're doing, and how I'm going about it. So I'm out in a corner of my yard that you don't really see me in a lot. And this out here is kind of an awkward area because it's close to the road, which you can see I'm always trying to constantly create screening. So I have arborvitae that are coming out of their winter burn right now. And beyond that here, I have a high line up above, so I have to worry about height. So right in here, kind of in this buffer area, I'm planting some really great columnar trees. Now, I like columnar trees, which means what? They're upright, that they have a more tight form to them. Let me show you why. Before we get over to those trees, let me here just appease my little guy here. Kip is the whole time at my feet waiting for me to throw. So these trees I love because, the stick got stuck. He doesn't know what to do. This is the most adorable thing. When something gets stuck that he just looks at you. Here it is, Kip. Oh, there you go. So a columnar tree is going to be a little bit more tight in its growth habit. So it's not going to be quite as wide as a shade tree. It's going to be very upright, but still get tall. So these are Regal Prince oaks. They get probably 12, maybe up to 15 feet wide. And then they still get really tall, like they can get up to 30 foot tall eventually, but they will not encroach on the high line. So I don't want the company to ever come in and want to top them off or cut them out like they do to big trees. So instead I'm planting these exactly for the purpose of them not having to be cut up later on. So what I've decided I want up here is really kind of a small grove of these Regal Prince oaks. I had 3 originally, and I wanted to feel more like I meant to have, a small grove of them so they create more screening. But since they're so upright, they're gonna have a really architectural look. So what I'm doing is laying out some new ones I got. And to make sure I get the spacing correctly and that matches the original ones, I'm using just my foot meter. So a foot meter you can find really anywhere. And what they do is they just run across the ground and they count up as you're going. So see how the feet are counting up. So you can then pretty quickly and roughly measure things in between. And especially for trees, this is great because even if you don't know where to put a shade tree, this foot meter will allow you to know the spacing. So what I like to do is look at it full grown. So what a tag says is the full size of a tree, which if we look on a tag, they usually should say, so you can see the front says it's a Regal Prince oak. If we look at the back, right up there it says that they can get 15 foot wide. Their full width someday in the future could be 15 to 20 foot. So that means I want to really know how big these trees get, and I want to measure them out so I can see that someday if they get to their full growth, whether that's 15 to 20 foot, will they be touching, will they not? And then I can decide where I want to put them. So once I have that laid out and I kind of have my trees roughly where I want, I did put up a string line to make sure my front row is going to be even, because I'm going to have 3 in a row and I really want them to look like they're in form. So let's go over here and talk about the hole I'm digging. I have my first hole dug and it's right in line with my string. And what I did first was take the sod out around it. And for that, I just use my half moon edger and I just push it in, which I can show you on one of my next ones. But I just push it in around the whole ring, and I usually go to a few feet out. So the center of the tree I had in the middle to start, and then made a circle around it, pulled the sod out, which you can save. You can plant this somewhere else in your yard if you need pieces of sod, or you can just, discard it. But now what I'm gonna do is see if my hole is big enough. I'm gonna take the tree out, scarify the roots, and put some biotone in the hole. Because anytime I plant something new, I'm gonna add some good biotone, because it is a starter plant food for those roots. And that's really what you wanna get active when you first plant something, is you want the roots to get active. I pulled the tree out of the container, and you can see here, you see all these roots. So what I'm first doing is just really scarifying them, which that just means you can do it either with a spade, you could do it with a knife, which you've seen me do sometimes, or if they're loose enough, you can do it with your hand. But that means just roughing them up, because what this does is they can encircle and really start getting tight when they're grown in a container, and you want them to want to start branching out and going into the native soil, and you want them to go out laterally. So when I break them up, when I really start, see what I'm doing here, to especially like the bottom half of that root ball, but I am just tearing them all up, so it really stimulates them to want to grow outwards. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to go around the whole tree and do this and make sure those roots are starting to get one bit pulled out. And don't feel bad even taking one of the roots and doing this, because when they're really tight, it's like they have a memory. So you want to open them up and get them more used to growing outward. I have my hole dug. I have the biotone is right in the hole. And now you can tell I really scarified these roots. So I just broke them up, got them ready to go into the hole so they're stimulated to grow. The next important thing when you're planting any tree, and you can see I'm just setting it in here to check my placement, but look here at this root flare. So we hear the word root flare a lot, but what does that really mean? So root flare is where the trunk meets the soil in the roots and it wants to start growing out laterally. So you can see here we have these lateral roots coming out. This one is really flaring out. You want to expose this slightly and have it be just above ground. So I think of it, if a root flare looks like this, that sits just above the ground where the roots start going down into the ground. And when I put the soil back, I want to make sure to keep this exposed. A lot of times when you buy trees in nurseries, this can be covered, you know, the bottom 4 to 6 inches can have loose soil put on top of them in the container. You need to expose that flare before you plant it, because that is how roots get the right oxygen mix they need. If you don't expose this, it can really actually slowly suffocate a tree and choke it off. So now I can tell my placement's right. Once the soil is back in here, it's going to be at a good place, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, you can see this is planted now in the ground. You can see that that root flare is still just above the ground level, which is what we want. And don't be afraid to slightly plant it a little high if you need to, because guess what? This displaced soil, what we just planted, it will somewhat settle. Soil always does once you dig it out, then put it back. So you can see, it really is not that tricky to plant a tree. It takes a few little tips, a few little tricks that can help it do better, but honestly, they're pretty easy. So I have 3 more to go plant, which look how quick and easy that was, and now how pretty it's gonna be. I'm really excited to see these kind of growing together. So let's go plant a few more, and then maybe we'll get to the yard. In true Iowa fashion, I don't know if you see it around me, we are getting some sleet, little bits of hail right now. Why not, right? It may be 50 degrees, but it can still sleet. I'm gonna keep planting because you don't really get wet with sleet. It just kind of feels weird. So I'm gonna keep planting the trees, but welcome weather. I know. Okay, I am on to the last one now, and you can see what I did from the other ones I did. I put the tree in the center, and then I first take my edger and I just make a ring around the tree. I think it's easier to be able to space and make somewhat of an even circle for the tree if I use my edger and keep the tree there and just go around the same distance the whole way. And then just make that cut. And now I'll take my spade and actually go under, lift the sod out, set it aside. You can see I'm just piling it right now. And then I will move it away. You know, we take grass away for a couple reasons. All these roots of the grass, if they are too close to especially a young tree, they're gonna take a lot of the moisture and really kind of stress the tree. They're gonna suck up nutrients and moisture at a lot of the capillary roots of the tree, and it won't always get what it needs, especially when it rains and things like that. So that's why you want to take the sod away. Now, once we start to get a little bit closer to spring and I start getting my loads of mulch, I will put a nice mulch ring around the tree to suppress any weeds, keep some moisture retention there, and just so it looks better. You can see here, the trees that were here and are established, they have mulch rings. So I will be doing that. But now, I'm just gonna lift this sod So I'm gonna take my spade now, my more straight edge spade, and I'm gonna go in, make a cut, lift the sod out, and then dig a hole for the final one. It always feels good when you get to the last one. Okay, all the trees are planted. There was just 4 of them. Now, honestly, if you would want, you can put down a tarp or have a big, a big bucket or something you can throw soil into so the displaced soil doesn't go on your grass. Honestly, it's early enough in the spring for me. We're gonna get a lot of rains. I scraped or raked as much of it back in, which you can see there. I'm not worried, it's gonna go away. And this isn't in, my yard, it's yes for beauty, it's for that thing to enjoy, but it's also just for use. So it gets used hard and dirt gets thrown on the grass and it lives and it's fine. So I am now going to clean up out here. I have all the sod loaded and we're gonna move on. We're gonna fertilize some grass. Why not? It's a decent day. It's not sleeting anymore at least, so we'll get there. Okay, after I've gotten all it cleaned up with all the trees and everything, I'm now starting to think about fertilizing the yard, which honestly, I get a lot of questions about my yard. I think it sometimes looks better in videos or pictures than it does up close. There are weeds in the grass. There just are. I try to be really organic and try not to put any pesticides or herbicides on my yard. Of course, they could drift in from obviously surrounding areas, but what I put on my yard is not. So I do try to take as much of an organic approach as I can, and I do put down some organic fertilizer here multiple times a year, and it depends. I'm gonna be honest. I don't always have a perfect regimen when it comes to yard maintenance, just because I have to do what really works and what I have time for, which to me, the first and foremost, the most important thing is I mow my yard long. I don't mow it below 3 inches ever, because I think a long yard, it helps shade out the weeds. It helps promote not so much of a stressed grass, and it keeps it just a little bit healthier. Really, the best organic approach is just to have the healthiest lawn you can. So I'm gonna flip this around and I'm gonna show what I'm just about to do so I can hopefully green this up even more. That's the hope. So I have a large yard and I'm gonna be working on the backyard here right now, kind of around this formal area. And guys, it is just a normal broadcast spreader. So that's what this is a broadcast spreader. And that means that you set a gauge, and when you open it up here, it opens up the holes on the bottom, and depending on what kind of fertilizer you're using, you do different settings, and then it drops that amount of fertilizer down underneath on this broadcast spreader, and as that spins as you're walking, it just pushes out into the yard. So I, of course, always use Espelma Organic, and their lawn food, what's nice about it is you use the same lawn food multiple times a year. So early spring, late spring, you can put it up, and the thing is, if you don't have time to put it up every single season, don't feel bad. That's the best part of it. But on the back, it will tell you roughly, what to set your spreader at, depending what spreader you have. And it's super easy. So, nothing's going to be perfect, but it is going to give it some good organic nutrients. And I think that's what's important. It gives it a hit of nitrogen, which is going to help it green up. It gives it some calcium, some sulfur, it gives it all those things. And what is great is they put their biotone in it, which I always use biotone when I'm planting anything. So it just really helps the roots get stimulated and really gets them to grow. So I'm going to go ahead, dump it right in here and start walking. That's really all there is to it. And get as much done as I can. It probably will take more than one bag, obviously, but it's a good start. So you can see it's honestly pretty simple. The thing with grass, I don't go to a lot of work with my grass. It has to really maintain itself. I do not water it. I have no watering systems anywhere here. So it gets watered well in the spring by the rain, sometimes into summer, and then usually midsummer we start getting extra dry, if not close to a drought. And so it gets no rain later on, and it usually goes semi-dormant towards the end of summer, wakes back up in the fall. And that's just how my grass is, we all have to do what we have to do. So doing something like a nice organic fertilizer is just gonna help it along, promote a little bit more green, also promote some better root structure, which I think is great. What I like to do when I have time and when it allows, is do some deep core aeration by taking plugs out in the fall and then overseeding with some fresh grass seed too. I don't get that done every year, but that's a great way to help compaction, break up the roots, help give some air down below where they need it, and really help it just gain some better traction for the coming years. So that's what I'm doing. I have more grass to fertilize now. I have some more things to transplant, and it's not even full on spring yet. It's still early spring. That's the best part. So I hope you kind of enjoyed some of this. We planted actually some brand new trees, really broke up the roots, showed the root flares, I think is so important. Then we fertilized the grass. So a lot's going on, more is going to happen. And as always, keep checking back. Check my website, wyseguide.com. Here, I'm always around doing something. That's the fun part. And when you share these videos, it makes me do a little bit of a cartwheel inside, because it's so exciting to see people getting excited about gardening, excited about cooking and growing your food. That's the whole point of life. So can't wait till we catch up again.